Hello, and thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, The Marriage of Data and Creative, How to Find Surprising Points of Connection for Hyper-Relevant Advertising Moments. My name is Laura Beth Ezel, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to our conversation about creating more relevance and connection in advertising. We are thrilled to have participating in today's webinar, Joseph Intile, VP Creative Services in Market, and Nikki Gertner, Director of Product Marketing with Celtra. So let's talk about advertising. Now, in today's competitive consumer marketing landscape, customers are constantly inundated with advertisements and calls to action. Only the most relevant and personalized ones can break through the noise to be heard, and marketing data is a critical part of the process that can make ads relevant and personalized. The experience of an ad, its presentation, format, how it appears on the page, and when you see it, influences how a potential customer interacts with it. In market and Celtra customers develop the best possible experience for customers and make sure those moments stand out by using contextual data to make them more relevant. How are they doing it? That's what we want to highlight today. We all know there are hundreds of moments sprinkled throughout your ideal customer's day where a prompt or a reference to your brand would be incredibly valuable. But many brands have not yet achieved their full potential in knowing when and where to act. That's what we've brought marketing and advertising experts from Celtra and InMarket to do today. Now, Nikki and Joseph will share their experience of helping customers marry data and creative to make the most of relevant, memorable moments throughout the consumer journey and provide some tips and insights that can help you do the same. So, Joseph, Nikki, hello, and thank you for joining us. I wonder, can you share your big why with us when it comes to using data and context in advertising? And why do you think this is the path forward for the marketers we're talking to today? Joseph?
Yeah, first, thank you so much for having us. Super excited to dive into this conversation with you and Nikki. So, from my perspective, I feel like no one wants to be bombarded with irrelevant content. Everyone wants to see something that means something to them and brings some sort of value to their lives. And that's really a pretty critical theme of so much of the work we do here at InMarket. We want to avoid inundating people with things they don't want to see. So our goal has become, showing people fewer ads overall, but the ads they are going to see are ending up being hyper relevant and super focused on what's important to that shopper in that moment. And when we do this, it really allows brands to meet their customers exactly where they are and to be really intentional about the context in which they're serving these ads. With things like built-in relevancy and context that we can base on indicators like weather, location, and audience, time of day, so on. Possibilities are limitless. So one thing I really do love to look back when thinking about this is our breakthrough moments reports. We release these reports twice a year at InMarket, and what they do is they show the best of the best of our full screen takeover creatives, which we call moments. And what I've been seeing as I look back at these over the last handful of years is a really growing pattern of creatives making this list that are using some sort of contextual or dynamic element, and it's becoming more and more prominent on this list every year. So I think it's kind of in line with a trend we're seeing across the industry as a whole as well. So, for me, it's really gratifying to back up this belief in data-driven creatives with actual stats like click-through rates that are, 5, 10, sometimes 15 times over the industry benchmarks. So, all this is to say, when you leverage a partner that has, a real quality of data required to power those features, working with truly accurate data, not just good guesses, then I think you can do some really innovative things. And Nikki, I'm sure you've got even more from your perspective to layer onto that.
Sure. Thanks, Joseph. And thanks for having me. So from Celtra's point of view, and like we were saying earlier, on average, I think the average American is exposed to about 4,000 to 10,000 ads in a day. So that's a lot of information. And the concept of ad blindness or banner blindness is real. The need for brands to break through that noise of all the other ads in the marketplace is super important so that their message can get through. One way to do that is through personalization. But the idea of personalization isn't new. Every user on the internet is operating in their own silo that can be personalized to their preferences. And as more brands take advantage of their ability to personalize content and advertisements, the ads that don't take this approach are going to become less noticeable. So at Celtra, we see the context of an ad as another layer of the creative experience itself, an essential layer in providing a positive experience with rich content that's capturing the user's attention based on what they're doing or what's speaking to them in any given moment. It also becomes a question of excellence in achieving a new level of a memorable creative experience, right? There's some movie trailers that just don't hit the same if you're not watching them on the big screen. So the content of the ad itself must be relevant, but you also need to make the context integral to the experience of the ad itself. And we're really excited to see that happening more and more at Celtra.
4 to 10,000 per day. When you stop to think about it, it probably is. That's just incredible to think about. So just powerful information there. Thank you both. Now we have a lot of practical advice to share in today's webinar, but I think it's so powerful when we can start with an example of what we're talking about. My understanding is that we can look at some still shots of still successful contextual ads that were live in the field in late 2022. So Joseph, I'm going to hand it off to you to walk us through how these were constructed and why you think they were so effective.
Yeah, absolutely. So in regards to the creatives we've been building for Steel Ink for several years now, location data has always been playing a huge role in their success. And the examples we're going to be able to look at today definitely follow that trend. Every creative we build for them relies in some way or another on location. But for these, the data was really the essential ingredient. And again, for people that don't know, Steel Ink offers power tools like leaf blowers, chainsaws, lawnmowers, and things like that. And they're not available at the traditional big box retailers like a Lowe's or Home Depot. You can only find them at independently owned local dealers. So it wasn't only crucial that we made sure we got these creatives in front of the right people at the right time. We also really had to be cognizant of making sure they knew exactly where to go to find these products. So the creatives were built to then dynamically display the address of the nearest dealership based on the user's current location at the top of each unit. And the click-through of the page is then generated dynamically as well to bring the customer to that matching dealer's e-commerce site. So almost every single creative we've built for Steel has the dealer location somewhere on the screen because that's such an important part of their business model. And many are featured in interactive experiences with things like videos, product galleries, immersive explorable settings. It's great that we can really kind of layer these experiences on in tandem at the same time. And again, these are always really most powerfully illustrated with our full screen moments units. And then just a little more info on how moments for us here at InMarket work. We serve these at a bunch of different touch points along the consumer's shopping journey. So for example, we have in-home moments that are shown when someone is obviously at home. We have in-path moments that are shown when they're en route to a shopping trip. In-store moments are shown when they cross a threshold into a grocery store or a retailer or whatever it is. And then in-hand moments are reserved for when someone's actually in the aisle, interacting or holding the product in their hand. So we really try to keep this top of mind. We really carefully consider all the different points in time that someone might be interacting with the brand. And then we've learned to tailor those experiences to those specific moments in time. So these creatives are obviously, in particular, using the dynamically generated dealer locator at the top corner. And again, we see this with a variety of interactive content, videos, galleries, and then what ended up being our most successful moment of the entire year in 22 in terms of our click-through rates, our brand new immersive offering, this panoramic explorable setting where consumers get to explore around a yard and expand these product tiles to see what equipment might be best suited for their yard job.
Yeah, that's a great selection of ads there, Joseph. Thank you for that. And with such a clear example of success in the space, I think this information we're about to share will resonate with even more of you. So let's start the conversation with the best kinds of data to use to identify the most impactful moments for brands to act. So what should brands be on the lookout for? What obstacles are in place for consumer brands trying to collect and act on data today? And how do you all handle that with your customers? Just a few questions there. Joseph?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, we're only ever as good as the data we're given. Steel Inc. has been a great partner at providing really detailed and accurate location lists for us to build these creatives off of. And then the experiences we're able to build with that data end up being a lot better for that. The lessons that we learn from clients like this, we share with all of our other customers. One of the most important ones I feel like is, you can have the most amazing creative experience in the world, but if you're not getting it in front of the right person, then it's a lot of wasted time, wasted effort, wasted content going out there. Simply put, I like to analyze it to a bow you're loading with 10,000 arrows and then hoping to hit something. The more methodical approach we take here at InMarket is aiming just one arrow super intentionally and then making sure you're sure to hit your target. And then with the amazing tools that Celtra has built, we're able to then scale that amazing result many, many times over. It's really great that we can just make these creatives even bigger and spread to more people with the ease of tools like Celtra. So Nikki is someone who helps that happen on a daily basis. I'm sure you've got your own great perspective on that too.
Thanks, Joseph. Yeah, so we work with a lot of different partners that have access to a lot of different data, and it often comes down to the value of the publisher's first party data, right? Where that ad is going to show up. And that basically defines why an advertiser would want their message to run adjacent to that publisher's content. So, we like to encourage our clients to keep that in mind, right? What is the publisher's value? What is the value of their first party data? It provides this super clear window into context, basically what that person may or may not be purchasing, and can provide clues for what's suitable to advertise to them at any given time. And so right now, any site or publisher that has some first party data has the capability of using it in some creative way. And through partners like InMarket, brands can leverage and connect to larger sources of data, whether it's the location or the time of day or an audience segment, and build upon that contextual narrative so that the performance story goes beyond just clicks. A creative like what we just saw on screen, which requires the user to wipe their finger across the device, wiping away something, is going to be able to drive an engagement narrative, a time spent narrative, something beyond just clicks. So finding a way to use that data to tell that deeper story in the context of the ad, that's really where we try to push our partners into. Important to note too that due to the transition away from cookies and the changes to first party publisher data, we don't know yet what universal standards are going to be replacing cookies. But in the meantime, publishers are strengthening their value of first party data, and brands can take advantage of that. We predict at Celtra that more closed ecosystems will be on the rise and more proprietary solutions will be developed by the big players. But we expect publishers to lean into those privacy enhancing technologies like data clean rooms and other authentication solutions. So keeping an eye on the data you can get from that is super important.
Yeah, and this conversation begins and ends with data, of course. So, thank you for sharing that and focusing on that. I think the next most helpful thing we can discuss is how the brands listening to us today can start to think about their own data. So, what should they be looking for when it comes to building their own hyper relevant advertising moments, Nikki?
Yeah. When clients come to us and they want help to identify like what makes their special sauce, as we like to call it, like how they can identify those moments, we often try to approach it with this crawl, walk, run mentality. Because a lot of our customers, they're sitting on some great data, but they don't really know how to weave that into the experience to tell that story. So if we're asked what kind of data should we use or how do we go about creating those hyper relevant advertising moments, we like to say that you start with the crawl, right? These are going to be your off the shelf data signals like the time of day, things that can easily be sniffed out from that user based on the device they're using, their location, things like that. The second step there would be the walk approach, which would be to layer something less obvious on that requires a secondary layer of data, like knowing what that person is beyond just their IP address. Maybe it's an audience segment they're falling into, their household income, stuff like that. And then finally, the last step of that is to run, right? By scaling that effort, which is really what in-market does, and building up the amount of variance that those signals are triggering within the creative so that that message is hyper personalized and hyper targeted to that audience viewer.
So yeah, I totally sympathize with the crawl, walk, run mentality. I know from my perspective, I'm always meeting with clients that maybe haven't really worked in rich media much at all or ever before, and it can be a really scary thing to kind of just dive into, and they can be really hesitant about these seemingly limitless capabilities and sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. So, or even something as simple as just doing something outside of what has been working for that brand for a long time. But I found it's a super rewarding thing to be a part of that process of being able to introduce these brands to some of these concepts for the first time. Once people see success stories like this, it quickly changes from a question of, well, should we do this, to a question of, what type of super cool data-driven experience are we going to build? For example, one type of dynamic creative we're getting asked to build a lot right now from our clients are based on API feeds and product feeds. We're seeing a lot of these with retailers and grocery chains who want to build or recreate a circular ad experience like you would find in the newspaper, but digital, and doing so using a feed that based on location, it's going to be able to pull in available products near you, their current prices, their current availability, you name it, any kind of data point we want to share based on those contextual signals. And when we get a really solid framework of data to work with, we can then scale that to as many locations as we want with awesome tools like Celtra, so that we're not building thousands of units, updating them manually every single day. We would completely lose our minds. So it's amazing that we're able to pull that data in and then dynamically generate it thousands and thousands of times over in real time. So, I always like to encourage brands to look at what's going to be most important for their customers to see. Is it product pricing? Is it availability? Is it maybe a carousel of recipes that changes based on the weather or the time of day? These are the questions we always start asking. And then the answers really allow us to build some super memorable experiences.
Absolutely. And it's just really encouraging to hear, Joseph. So, Nikki, I love that companies can enter into this kind of creative at a level that's appropriate to them. Go all out if you're already familiar with it, or start small and build if it's new to you. So can you offer any thoughts on specific best practices you use when creating the creative itself? What can you tell us about placements and development that can make those moments along the customer journey shine? Joseph?
Yeah. So, in general, again, looking back at our moments capabilities, I like to think about what messaging and what experiences a given person is seeing at the specific point in the shopping journey they're currently on. Someone at the start of their journey might not necessarily need a click to buy call to action if it's the first time they're seeing a product or a brand. They might need some education. So our approach is centered around this first touch point, giving someone an engaging first moment with a brand that it's going to create a really memorable experience and leave them with a positive association with that brand or product. So something that intrigues or speaks to them and maybe drives them to engage with the brand in the real world is a great goal to have. Some of our most successful campaigns start with a creative that might not necessarily have a super highly actionable call to action first. It could be a game or an interactive experience that might not even lead to an e-commerce page in the end, but it's going to really leave that person with a memorable, personalized experience that's going to stick with them. And then in future creatives, we'll start to reinforce that memory with more specific catered messaging about a product or where to make a purchase. It becomes a bit of a game of patience, but once brands have made that connection with the consumer, then you've got a customer for life because of the time and effort that's been put into nurturing that relationship from the very start with really relevant, meaningful content. And in terms of future ideas, I'm really excited about new capabilities with virtual and augmented reality and the ability to bridge that digital and physical world within a creative experience. That's something we're always looking to do. And that and AI, which it's in the news every day. It's been growing at light speed. There's a lot of uncertainty about what it can and will do and should do. But I think moving forward, there can be a place for this somewhere down the road with a decent amount of careful consideration.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think one thing that I think of when it comes to tips and techniques is just leveraging a wide array of interactive or non-interactive components. In order to start a conversation with someone, you might not want to put too much in front of them. It might be a little overwhelming. So it might be good to start with a little bit of video and then take advantage of other interactive components that could layer on top of that, such as hotspots or gaming components. At Seltra, we publish a creative insights report where we found actually that shoppable ads have the longest average exposure time, about like over 30 seconds of exposure time, of all the different types of features and functionalities that we see going into ads. So continuing the narrative along with the buyer journey through that funnel, maybe showing them something shoppable and then later on showing them something to promote awareness, is really, important to kind of keep that conversation flowing. For example, also we see a lot of creative experiences and formats being leveraged more often that are built specifically to drive KPIs. Not everything drives CTR, not everything drives video views. If you have an image gallery in your ad, you are not going to be able to speak towards video completion rates. So it's important to start with a good understanding too of the metrics that are going to translate to success, so you can manage sort of the layout, the design, and the overall experience of that ad so that it'll drive those metrics.
Excellent points from both of you. I can't thank you enough for your time today. That's all the time we have to have today. Thank you for sharing so much of your expertise with us today. And also thank you to our audience for joining us. Have a great day, everyone.